everyone. Please rise in body and spirit, or as willing or able, and join us for our hymn, 113, Where is Our Holy Church?
Good morning. My name is Linda Karen-Nicholas, and I am a member of the Board of Trustees. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Hudson Valley. Whether you have been with this congregation a decade or more, or this is your first time visiting, we welcome you. Whatever the faith and traditions of your past, we welcome you. Whatever your theological stance, we welcome you. Whoever you are and whomever you love, we welcome you. Whatever your heritage, we welcome you. We respectfully acknowledge the territory on which our church building sits as the ancestral homeland to the Munsee, Lenape, and Wappinger people. I have a couple of announcements here. First of all, before I forget, there's coffee and donuts in Fellowship Hall. They just appeared, I don't know.
Courtesy of Anscombe.
Our first general interest in planning meeting for UUCHV's new open mic night is coming up on Thursday, April 7th at 7 o'clock. Reach out to Oran by email for the Zoom link to participate, or by email. You can find all the information you need in the e-news. Save the date, May 21st, for the annual auction. The theme this year is the Roaring Twenties, so start thinking of goods and services that you might offer. Musical news. The UU Choir has resumed rehearsals in preparation for Easter Sunday and beyond. There are rehearsals Sunday morning at 8:45 and Thursday, April 14th at 7 p.m. All are welcome. For the most up-to-date information, please refer to our weekly newsletter and check our website frequently. That newsletter comes up like Thursday morning, sometime Thursday, depending on how fast the rest of us get it to read it. The website is also the place where you can find contact information for our staff, Board of Trustees, and other congregational leaders. And please join us for conversation after the service. If you are present in this sanctuary, feel free to stay right here. If you're watching the live stream, the link for a Zoom coffee hour can be found in the Saturday reminder of your email and on our website. If you are just recently joining us and would like to receive our weekly e-news, please email us with your name and we will make sure you are added to our e-news list. We can also answer any questions you might have. You can email us at uucroton@gmail.com or fill out one of the yellow cards in the back of the pews. Please silence your cell phones at this time, and once again, we welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Hudson Valley.
In answer to a call as old as time and as deep as the rivers, may we celebrate and cherish our common life together. In this common house of memory and hope, may we hold those loving truths which endure close to our hands, hearts, and minds. May our songs ring out like waves of love and goodwill, creating a sense of beauty, strength, and purpose beyond our own.
Our chalice lighting today comes from Leslie Takahashi. Here in this place of peace, may we find hope. Here in this place of connection, may we find life-giving community. Here in this place of rest, let the unrest of our hearts turn us toward justice. Here in this space made by sacred memories of connection, let us each feel ourselves part of the new that grows from the old in the spiraling unity of years. Now please join me in saying our unison affirmation. The words are in your order of service. Inspired by love, our mission is to seek our true nature, connect deeply and openly, and act for justice. Now let us bear witness to the joys and sorrows experienced in our community. If you have a personally significant joy or sorrow that you are willing to share, please come up to this microphone. If you would prefer to only have a candle lit without speaking, please just stand and I will light a candle for you.
Hello everyone, my name is Jeffrey and I was here last week with my colleague Judy. We were from the Loft LGBTQ+ Community Center, and I just wanted to say I had such an amazing experience last week that I decided to come back and bring my husband Glenn. He's here with us, and I just want to say how grateful we are to be here in such a loving and wonderful place. Thank you to Kathy for being such a kind and warm person to us, and it's just really great to be here. Thank you so much.
I just wanted to say that it was a joy. We actually had a pretty good time at the cleanup yesterday. Considering it wasn't freezing and windy, but thank Chris, Megan, Sherry, Betsy, Daria, Carl. I think that's everybody, but Terry and Kyla, of course, and Maggie. But thanks everybody, and it was a good time. It was nice to get together and spruce up the place a bit.
So this isn't really a sorrow, but just so that I don't have to tell like people 20 times during coffee hour, I had an investigational procedure on my knee that was supposed to hold off a knee replacement, not a little setback. So I'm back in the brace, but doing fine. And my joy is Brian's still engaged 1 week later.
This is in an email from Eddie Freed. A joy. Claire and I celebrated our 51st anniversary today. Our love and commitment to each other is as intense as ever. And the sorrow, we celebrate our anniversary with Claire possibly right now undergoing emergency total hip replacement surgery. She fell while walking our dog yesterday. Your prayers for her are deeply appreciated. Get well soon, Claire. And I have a personal joy. As many of you know, I'll be leaving Croton at the end of this church year in July. However, I've not told you where I'm going, and I found out this week I'm going to the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Akron, Ohio. So I'll be much closer to family and friends, and certainly my sons, whom you may meet next Sunday. I believe they will be in church next week. So that is a joy as well.
We also acknowledge all the unspoken joys and sorrows held within the sanctuary of our hearts. And all those people who have yet to find a spiritual home where they can share their joys and sorrows.
This time I invite you to join in the spirit of meditation. You may want to do so by sitting up a little straighter, either at home or in your pews, putting your feet flat on the floor to ground you to the earth. Close your eyes if you wish to, or leave them just slightly open. And slowly take in a nice deep breath and gently release it, releasing all of the stress of the week. One day, the happy Buddha, Ho-Tai, was passing through a village. He sat down under a tree with his eyes closed, not laughing, not even smiling, completely calm and peaceful. A villager asked him, "You're not laughing, Ho-Tai." He opened his eyes and said, "I am preparing." The villager did not understand. He said, "What do you mean by preparing?" Ho-Tai replied, "I have to prepare myself for laughter. I have to rest. I have to go within. I have to forget the whole world so that I can recharge and then be filled with laughter again." If you really want to laugh totally, you must also spend time sitting in silence. If you really want to laugh, you must learn about the relationship between laughter and tears. The more you laugh, the more you cry, and vice versa. Have you ever experienced that sometimes you laugh so hard that tears come, and that sometimes when you're crying, laughter suddenly appears? These two energies are deeply connected, and out of these polarities you find your balance. Your inner silence goes even deeper. Then life is a dance. You can laugh, you can cry, you can be silent, you can be ecstatic, you can be still. Let us be together now in a moment of silent meditation.
Today's reading is by Seth Zuiho. It's called Ho-Tai. The happy fellow on the cover of the Order of Service is Ho-Tai. In Chinese folklore, he's an eccentric Zen monk and the epitome of contentment. His name means cloth sack because he carries all his belongings in a bindle wherever he goes. He also stuffs the sack with donations of food and clothing from laymen and candy to give to children. A veritable fat, jolly Asian Santa Claus. In this picture, Ho-Tai himself is in his bag, and some have noted that the bag is a kind of enso, or Zen circle, symbolizing enlightenment, non-duality, and/or emptiness. Non-Buddhist Westerners often confuse Ho-Tai with the historical Buddha, and the Chinese themselves sometimes refer to him as the laughing Buddha. Some believe he is an earthly manifestation of the Bodhisattva Maitreya. Legend has it that when Ho-Tai died, he recited the following verse: Maitreya, the true Maitreya, has billions of incarnations. Often he is shown to people at the time. Other times, they do not recognize him. Ho-Tai also serves duty as one of the Japanese 7 gods of good fortune, the god of abundance and good health. That's a lot of weight for that happy little guy to carry in his bindle. There's a Zen story about Ho-Tai. When asked, what is the significance of Zen? He put his sack down on the ground. When then asked, what's the actualization of Zen? He picked his sack back up and walked away. Clever Ho-Tai, the very essence of Zen, letting go and dropping off whatever we're holding. The very actualization of Zen, drawing water and chopping wood. Ho-Tai lives life at the crosshairs of the absolute and the relative. Please stand as you are able and join in singing hymn number 86, Blessed Spirit of My Life, from your gray hymnal.
Style over substance. That was how my friend characterized it. She was a colleague of mine who was frustrated with her congregation. I think the social justice issue for her church was helping foster kids who had aged out of the system. But in a way, it doesn't matter what the issue was. My colleague served in a church that had a great long history of activism and engagement in the wider community. However, those days had long passed, and now they were kind of living off the reputation that they had gained from those glory days. Or perhaps the reputation they imagined they had from the glory days. But at any rate, They're all about style over substance, she complained. Now, this was a serious issue. Foster kids who turn 18 are no longer wards of the state. The state has nothing to do with them at that point, and in far too many cases, those foster kids who reach 18 don't have much by way of support system. This was a segment of the community that needed real help. It wasn't make-believe. Now, to their credit, my friend's congregation sincerely cared about these young adults. There was a certain level of authenticity to that effort, but most of the members felt that it was their minister's job to do that work. She should be the one out there protesting at the steps of the Capitol, advocating for legislation, organizing care packages, arranging mentors, writing letters to the editor. And it was that latter that eventually prompted my friend's frustration. Working with these young adults had been a rather revolutionary program a decade ago. Her congregation had received some favorable press coverage as a result, so much so that they had kind of come to expect it. They assumed that their church's name, their minister's name, would feature prominently on the front page of the paper. Heck, maybe even a few of the members' names would be above the fold too, as they say. Why wasn't this happening like it used to? My colleagues suspected that there was more than merely a disagreement over strategy on how to do social justice. To some degree it was, but there was a deeper, more spiritual problem at work here. Her church's main motivation for doing social justice work seemed to be the notoriety it brought them. Not everyone, but for quite a few people, getting their church's name in the paper was their primary motivation. And they were at a loss to understand why the minister resisted being the only one out on the front lines. Well, after exploring this difficulty with her, I remembered a book that I read some years ago. I may have mentioned it here, actually, a few times, called Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism by Chogyam Trungpa, a Tibetan Buddhist author. Occasionally, the Ministerial Fellowship Committee at the UUA asks for recommendations to its reading list, books that all seminarians are required to read before they become ministers. And Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism has been my recommendation for a number of years now. Someday they may listen to me. But Trungpa points out something I think that's quite brilliant, that we can use religion, spirituality, whatever you want to call it, to bolster our own egos rather than to question our egos. Spirituality can be morphed and mutated to serve our personal greed and desire rather than as a means of waking up from the delusion of our greed and our desire. It is not true of spirituality in general, all the time for everyone, of course, but it's rather a temptation, a pathology of you, if you will, that we can fall into sometimes. Helping young adults who are aging out of foster care is a good and noble thing for any congregation to take up. But it's also an opportunity for spiritual materialism to take hold. Religion and spiritual practice, regardless of what form it takes or the theology behind it, should expand us to have greater concern for others. It should not refocus our concern for ourselves and our self-aggrandizement. Buddhism famously struggled with this at one point in its history. There was what we call the old way of doing Buddhism, the Theravada, which means the way of the elders. And the goal of Theravada Buddhism was to help people attain enlightenment. And if you become enlightened, then you enter into a state of blissful nirvana, never to have to be reborn into this world full of suffering ever again. But as time went on, people started to question that a little bit. Isn't it a little selfish to want enlightenment only for yourself? What if the Buddha just wanted to get into nirvana all by himself? He didn't have to teach anyone or help anyone with their suffering, yet he did. He cared about other people. more than he cared about himself. He showed compassion for others. He knew that we're all interconnected. And if he were to become enlightened while other people are suffering, isn't that kind of selfish? And so Buddhism split into two general schools of thought. Not quite as dramatic, perhaps, as Protestants and Catholics, but something like that. One called the Hinayana, one called the Mahayana. The small vehicle and the greater vehicle. Now, as you might guess, the Mahayana, the greater vehicle folks, came up with those terms. Calling someone a practitioner of Hinayana is something of an insult, like their spiritual practice is somewhat lesser. But I think there is something to this, though. Hinayana can be a form of spiritual materialism. It's doing spirituality for selfish reasons. You put yourself ahead of other people. Now, religion, of course, is all about symbols. We Unitarian Universalists are sometimes of an anomaly because we love to explain the hell out of everything in our religion. Most people don't usually feel that impulse. So they want to convey the spirit of this Mahayana, the greater vehicle that transports lots of people to enlightenment through symbols, to communicate that. The spirit of the Mahayana is embodied in the form of a person called a bodhisattva. And a bodhisattva is a person who could enter nirvana if they wanted to. They're advanced enough to attain that level of enlightenment. However, they're moved by the suffering of all beings in the world, and they cannot abandon others to be alone with their suffering. And so, to help other people, a bodhisattva remains in this world voluntarily. Well, who are these people? Who are these bodhisattvas that come back again and again to help other people? Well, there are a lot of them, thankfully. One such person is embodied in the spirit of generosity, who we heard earlier. His name is Ho-Tai or Pu-Tai. This version we have up here by our chalice was a gift to me by my fiancée, Sherry. I call him Selfie Ho-Tai because it looks like he's giving himself a selfie. I don't know quite what that hand gesture is, but I kind of collect them, so she was adding a rather large one to my collection. As Oren mentioned, he was a Buddhist monk and priest in the 10th century in China. He was fat, bald, always smiling. His name means sackcloth because he had a bag full of gifts and candy he would pass out. Sort of like a cross between Santa Claus and Johnny Appleseed, if you will. That's who Ho-Tai was. Now, I'm sure you've seen this image plenty of times. Ho-Tai is most famously to be found in numerous Chinese restaurants throughout our country. Ho-Tai is meant to encourage people to indulge and enjoy the pleasures of eating at that restaurant. So if you ask the proprietor, who is that a statue of? They may tell you, well, that's Buddha. But it's not. He is a bodhisattva. And like all great statues in religion, Ho-Tai is symbolic. Being fat is a sign of abundance in China. Sometimes he's depicted with a lot of coins, a sign of wealth. Again, this is symbolic of abundance and not greed, as it might be interpreted in the West. Always smiling, hence his nickname as the Laughing Buddha. Rubbing his belly has no known benefits that I am aware of. Ho-Tai is a symbol of that Mahayana ideal. He's full of joy and happiness, the result of practicing Buddhism, they say. His belly and his sack symbolizes that abundant generosity. Ho-Tai doesn't keep things just for himself. He finds pleasure, immense pleasure, in being generous. And this is a generosity of both material goods and spiritual riches. His first thought, his whole reason for being, is to help other people, to help them feel the same kind of joy at being alive that he experiences. He's focused on others rather than himself. He's the antithesis of spiritual materialism. He wouldn't care if you put his name in the paper or not. He just wants to get the work done for the benefit of those who may be suffering. That is the main point of the Mahayana and the Bodhisattva ideal. As is frequently the case with these things that go back into antiquity, it's hard to tell what is in fact true and what is an embellishment of the tradition. It seems that there really was a fellow who lived in the 10th century and clearly made an impression on people. I'd be surprised if he perfectly corresponds to the statues that endured in the local Chinese restaurant. As we heard in our reading today, legend has it that Ho-Tai is believed to be an incarnation of the Bodhisattva Maitreya. And Maitreya is a big deal. He is the next Buddha that's supposed to appear in this world. That's the reason Ho-Tai is sometimes referred to as the Buddha. He's coming back. So Maitreya was one of Buddha's disciples. He was very advanced. Supposedly he is, as we speak, in deep meditation in the highest, most blissful heaven, awaiting just the perfect time to come back and reestablish a new golden age. Sounds a little familiar, doesn't it? Well, apparently Maitreya likes to kind of do spot inspections from time to time, just to see how things are progressing down here on Earth before he comes back in all his full glory as the next Buddha. We do this in business too, right? They call that management by walking around. So that's sort of what Ho-Tai was doing, management by walking around to check up on things. And that's why I entitled this sermon, The World to Come. Maitreya, in some cases, becomes something of a messiah in Buddhism. People have tried to usher in his return in both good and not so good ways. Some have thought, well, we just need to tear everything down so that Maitreya will come back and build it up. Others have taken a more Mahayana attitude, if you will. Maybe Maitreya will return when we've begun to practice loving kindness and compassion to each other. Maitreya, the next Buddha, returns to this world whenever we exhibit those qualities in our lives. We embody Maitreya ourselves, but we put the concern of others ahead of our selfish needs. I think that may be one of the key differences between that Hinayana and Mahayana. The Hinayana is about escapism. I'm in this world of suffering and I want to get out of it. It's all about the next world. Mahayana takes the suffering of this world seriously. Imagine one of those disaster movies or superhero movies where people are stuck inside a burning building and some people run out to save them. It's not an irrational thing to do, quite sensibly actually, but there are some people who are more advanced, more gifted, who go back into the disaster to rescue those who cannot be helped themselves. That is the hero, someone who puts the safety of others before their own. They go back into the burning building out of concern and compassion. For us today, that is Ho-Tai. In the reading, it's asked, what is the essence of Zen? And he drops his bag, letting go of the material objects of the world and the freedom that generosity brings. And then asked about the actualization of it, he picks it up. Spiritual life isn't all about letting go, about nothingness, about emptiness. It's also about returning to the world. Another one of the depictions of Ho-Tai is in a series of pictographs known as the 10 ox herding pictures. And in them, taming the ox is a metaphor for taming our mind. And it's about this little boy who's trying to tame the ox and all the different stages he goes through to sort of symbolize the stages of spiritual progression. Eventually the boy sees the ox and tames the ox in his own mind. But then, in the last picture, he disappears. The second to the last picture, he disappears. Everything disappears in kind of a mystical oneness with the universe. But what's interesting is that isn't the last picture. There's one more stage. The final stage for the young boy who's been trying to tame that ox is coming back as Ho-Tai, returning to the market with bliss-bestowed hands. He walks among the butchers and fishmongers. These are jobs that are looked down upon in Buddhism because they have to do with killing. A monk in the Theravada tradition would not associate or even shake hands with someone who did those sorts of jobs. But Ho-Tai is the bodhisattva that returns to the world, who dares to become impure and dirty with the rest of us. It's very much kind of in that same vein as Jesus, who ate with tax collectors and prostitutes, the downtrodden, the looked down upon in his day. Well, I wish I could say that my friend's congregation in Philadelphia saw the light, changed their ways, embraced the Mahayana, the greater vehicle, that they're now a congregation full of Ho-Tais, generous of spirit and joyous in life. No more do they tarry after the bright lights of being recognized for doing essentially nothing, but rather now they are content to make a real difference in people's lives, not seeking out the applause of others. I wish. Our conversation did make a difference, though, to my friend and colleague by having a frame of reference. It helped her see the struggles of her ministry. It also gave her a focus to her energy she'd not had before. So often in congregational life, and especially doing social justice work, it's easy to get distracted. Losing focus on our mission is a constant temptation. Ho-Tai helps. As an example of the spiritual life, he embodies generosity and that expansive self, quite literally, I guess. Notice that he's laughing. I think that's a key. So often when we're doing work to help others, we approach it as some sort of drudgery, like it's an obligation we have to do. Ho-Tai finds joy in life, especially being of service to others. I've never been one that gets too enamored with eschatology, the theories of how the world ends. I'm more of a this world kind of guy. So Maitreya is made present not when we're enwrapped in some mystical experience or when we've elected just the right political candidate. Maitreya is made real through our actions every day in ways both big and small, through the things we do collectively as a church and as individuals. We pick up the cloth sack and enter the village with bliss-bestowed hands, determined to help anyone who needs it, regardless of who they are. As Thomas Merton once wrote, our job in this life is to love people, regardless of whether or not they deserve it. May we never forget the bodhisattva impulse to be of service to others. May we have the spiritual maturity to cut through materialism and set aside our egos and illusions. May we be generous with our bliss-bestowed hands. I love you. Go in peace. Amen. I invite you now to rise as you are willing and able and join in singing hymn number 183, Winds of Change Forever Blown.
Each week, we make an offering from the bounty we are blessed to enjoy. We do this in a spirit of love and generosity, aware that we have benefited from those who have gone before, those who, in their turn, gave generously. Our offering goes to support the work of love and justice undertaken by this community. Today's offering will also be shared. Thank you. Today's offering will also be shared with the SPCA of Westchester. Thank you, guys. Please refer to our e-newsletter or website for more information. You can make your donation in several ways. If present in the sanctuary, you may give cash or a check in the offering plate as it comes by. You may also scan the QR code on your order of service. From your homes, you can make your donation via credit card or PayPal using the links provided in the e-newsletter. Please remember to give a little extra to compensate for the 3% surcharge, or if you prefer, you can always mail us a check. The offering will now be given and gratefully received. Please join me in extinguishing, Please join me in the dedication of the offering. The words are in your order of service. May these gifts and the work of our hands and hearts give power to all we stand for as a community of faith. Now, please join me in extinguishing the chalice. Thank you. The words are found in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
That which is worth doing, create with your hands. That which is worth repeating, speak with a clear voice. That which is worthy of remembering, hold in your hearts. And that which is worth living, go and live it now.